大家好，欢迎大家收看安娜看法节目。无论是突如其来的车祸，还是说在公共场所或者是工作场所受伤，人身伤害事故可能会对受害者的身体、心理和经济状况造成很大的影响。在这些情况之下，了解自己的法律权利，而且如何获得赔偿，以及如何保护自己，变得非常的重要。今天我们非常荣幸地邀请到了安娜律师楼的资深律师 Howard Cohn， 他将为我们大家讲解在不同的情况之下，受害者应该如何的应对，有哪些法律手段可以帮助大家争取合理的补偿。Hi Howard, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, how are you?
Hi Howard, let's start with one of the most common personal injury cases, car accident. 车祸啊是最常见的人体伤害啊，无论是轻微的剐蹭还是说严重的交通事故，受害者呢往往都会面临医疗费用、修车成本，甚至是长期的经济损失。所以呢，我想先问一下律师哈，发生车祸之后，受害者第一时间到底应该做什么呢？Howard, what should someone do immediately right after a car accident?
Well, first, they should stay with their vehicle if it's safe to do so, and wait for the police to come, call 911 if necessary, and then wait and speak to the police.
And how is the fault determined in a car accident case? 车祸的责任是怎么认定的呢 ，Howard？
A fault is determined upon negligence, and so negligence is basically the due care that you owe to another person. So if somebody is breaching their due cares because they're being negligent, then they will be considered at fault. In California, we are what is known as a comparative fault state, which means the courts will make a determination on percentage of fault. So somebody can be 80% at fault and somebody can be 20% at fault. And if the 80% at fault person is sued, they will have to pay 80% of the damages, and then the 20% person will be responsible for 20% of the damages. Some states are also what are known as a pure fault state, which means in order for you to collect damages, the other side has to be 100% at fault. But that has become in disfavor, and most states like California use the comparative fault standard.
那如果说车祸不是受害者的过错的话，他们可以申请哪些赔偿呢 ？Howard, what kind of a compensation can a victim claim if they are not at fault?
There's a number of different items of compensation they can claim. They can claim one, pain and suffering. So that is the pain element. The ouch, it hurt, and I'm discomforted. It's hard for me to sleep. That is pain and suffering. They're entitled to wage loss. So if they're unable to work, they can get their wage loss. Their medical payments. So if they have to go to the doctors, they have to go to the hospital, they have to get medications, all of those out-of-pocket expenses they can get. So generally speaking, they consider the out-of-pocket expenses everything other than pain and suffering. And then pain and suffering they get for the hurt aspect of it. That pain and suffering can also be increased if the damages are permanent or semi-permanent. They broke your leg, and yes, your leg will heal, but it's only 80% as good as it was before, just because it's now been injured and it's not good. So now you have a permanent injury. May not be a complete injury, but it's a permanent injury, and you will get compensated for that.
那如果说是自己的过失导致了这个事故，肇事司机是不是仍然可以寻求法律的保护或者是赔偿呢？ If a driver is at a fault, can they still seek legal protection or compensation, Howard?
Well, they do need legal protection. The number one form of legal protection they have is insurance. So when you have car insurance, basically you're paying another company to cover you for your negligence. As I said before, you have to establish negligence in order to get compensation. And what an insurance company is you will pay them money, and they will cover you and represent you against a claim of negligence to you. Now, so the first thing is, hopefully you have insurance. In California, in order to drive a car, you must have insurance. and the minimum insurances are 15, 30, 5. What that means is you have to have $15,000 coverage per person, $30,000 coverage per accident, and $5,000 property damage. Those are the minimum requirements in California. But they are truly the minimum, and if you get into an accident, it's very easy to exceed that minimum, and so people do and should have much more coverage. And I suggest coverage is based upon your wealth. Well, if you're a kid going to school and you have nothing, then you might as well have the minimum insurance because, one, you can't afford much more, and two, if the damages greatly exceed the policy limits, you can end up filing bankruptcy and you're not going to lose everything anyway because, frankly, you have nothing to lose. But if you're an established person and you have a lot of money, you don't want to put that money at risk. And the way you protect yourself and not put that money at risk is to have higher policy limits.
除了车祸受伤啊，其实在公园呀、商场啊、道路啊这样的公共场所受伤的情况也并不少见。比如说滑倒啊，或者是被高空的坠物砸伤啊，或者说因为设施不当而受伤啊，很多人都会问，这个时候啊，谁应该负责？所以呢，我想问一下律师哈，如果说有人在公共场所受伤的话，责任是由谁来承担的呢？Howard, who is responsible if someone gets injured in a public place?
Well, in a public place, it is the government that is responsible if they created a dangerous condition. But because it's a governmental agency, the government has a lot of additional protections that private people don't have. One is they have sovereign immunity. And so for some forms of negligence, they're just held by law not to be responsible. And two is the time you have to file a claim. In most personal injury accidents that are private, you have 2 years to file a claim. But the statute of limitations in California with regard to public entities is you have to file a claim within 6 months. And you file that claim with the county or state agency that you believe is responsible for the claim. And then they can review the claim and either settle the claim or deny the claim. And then you have 6 more months and able to file your claim. So the statute of limitations issue is the biggest difference between the two. The good news is if you sue a governmental agency, well, they have deep pockets. And so if you do it right and they are responsible, and you get a judgment against them, they can pay the judgment.
如果说受害者想要起诉政府机构的话，他们到底有哪些权利呢？Howard, what legal rights does an injured person have when suing a government entity?
Well, the legal rights they have in suing a private entity, I think you're talking about, is a little bit different than suing a public agency. We just talked about the public agency, so now we're going to talk about the private agency. For private, you generally have 2 years to sue a private company for negligence. And oftentimes there's something called strict liability, where negligence doesn't even have to be proved. They're just strictly liable based upon the kind of interaction you have with them. And the damages are the same. And for the private person, hopefully they will be covered by what is known as third-party liability insurance. This is if you're a business owner, that kind of thing. You tend to have your own insurance. So if someone gets hurt on your premises, which is known as premises liability, you'll have insurance to cover you.
好，非常感谢 Howard 啊。那除了我们刚才说到的几种受伤形式之外，工作场所受伤不仅仅会影响员工的健康，也可能影响到他们的职业生涯和收入那我想问一下，员工在工作场所受伤之后，第一步到底应该怎么做呢？What should an employee do immediately after a workplace injury?
In a workplace injury, the owner is vicariously liable for the injury, and so negligence does not have to be proven. And workers' compensation insurance, which all employers are required by law to have in California, covers the injury. So if you are injured and you are on the job, then you are covered. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. If it was your fault for slipping and falling on your own feet because you're careless, the employer is still responsible because they are vicariously responsible. Now, if somebody other than the employer caused the damage while you're at work on the employer's business, with regard to the employer, they are vicariously liable, so you sue them under the workers' compensation laws, but then you could possibly have, in addition to that, a third-party claim against the person that actually was negligent in causing the injury.
那么这个工伤赔偿制度到底是怎么运作的呢？在什么情况下员工是可以起诉雇主的呢 Howard? How does workers' compensation work, and when can an employee sue their employer instead?
It's really pretty simple. You are an employee, and that is a person that in California gets a W-2, and you get injured, and you're on the job. Those are the only requirements. Fault is not a requirement. Where other forms of negligence, you have to find fault. You have to find that the person that caused the injury was at fault. It was their fault. Here, fault doesn't matter. It just matters that you got injured, you are an employee, and the injury happened in the course and scope of your employment. Those are the requirements. And then you file for workers' compensation. The amount of money you get in a workers' compensation claim is a little bit different because they have schedules on how much you're going to get paid for your pain and suffering and different broken bones, etc.
好 Howard 我还想问您一个问题，也是我们广大的华人朋友特别想要了解的那就是聘请律师其实到底要花多少钱呢？而且这个律师可以为他们做什么事情呢？Howard 这个问题就是说 What does someone expect to pay for attorney when hiring them to represent them, especially when they are facing the injury cases?
If they want to hire a lawyer, there are two basic ways that a lawyer can get paid. One is they bill by the hour. So as much time as somebody spends working on your case, there's an hourly rate, and you will have to pay that hourly rate. And that's in almost all work that a lawyer does. Personally, injury work sometimes is compensated a little bit differently in that the lawyer may agree to take a percentage or be on a contingency fee where the attorney takes a percentage of whatever they collect. And I'll explain briefly what the difference is. On an hourly rate, you hire the lawyer and they're going to work on your case, and they're going to charge you by the hour for every hour that they work on the case. And so you will pay them whether you win the case, whether you lose the case, or whether you collect the money, even if you win the case. But if you win the case and you collect the money, all the money you collect is yours. So as an example, you get injured and you hire a lawyer to sue the person that caused the injury, and the damages are $1 million. Well, if the attorney just charges you by the hour, and let's say they're charging you $400 an hour, if they do 100 hours, that would be $4,000 or $40,000. And so now you're going to pay them $40,000 for all those hours. And if you collect that $1 million, the entire $1 million is yours, and you paid $40,000, so $960,000 would be yours. And so that is an hourly rate for personal injury compensation. However, many times, and actually most times, the person that gets injured doesn't have that kind of money to pay a lawyer. And so they want to make a deal with the lawyer where the lawyer takes it on a contingency fee, which would be a percentage of what is collected. So if that happens, the lawyer is now actually being your partner. And so if the lawyer wants to take that, the lawyer is going to look at two things. One, the probability of winning the case, because if they do all this work and they lose the case, yes, you don't collect any money, but then all that work the attorney does, and this is what they do for a living, they don't get paid a dime for it. So they're working for nothing. So one, they want to make sure that it's a good enough case where they have a good probability of winning it. Two, they want to make sure that the injuries are enough so that the damages are enough where the dollar amount is going to be significant enough. So when they do get an award, the dollar amount is large enough that their percentage that they're going to collect is enough so that they get a good enough fee for their work. And then third is the collectability of it. Let's say the person that hits you doesn't have insurance and they don't have any money. And yes, you're badly injured and you could sue them and collect and get an award for lots of money. Again, let's say $1 million. Well, that's just a judgment, and the judgment's just a piece of paper. If they don't have the money to pay it, then you can't collect it. And if you can't collect it again, yes, you don't get the money, but then the lawyer's done all this work and hasn't gotten paid. And so a lawyer, in order to take the case on a contingency fee, is going to look at who is at fault and whether they're pretty sure that they can find the other person at fault, the amount of injury, so the amount of damages, and then the collectability of the award. And once that is determined, then you can work out the agreement where the attorney will take it on a contingency fee and you don't have any out-of-pocket costs. And then once you collect money, then the attorney gets a certain percentage of that amount of money. That percentage usually runs on a low end of 20 to 25% and on a high end around 50%, with the average being in the neighborhood of 40%.
好，非常感谢 Howard 为我们大家介绍啊，如果说发生了人体伤害的事情啊，到底应该如何的去维护自己的权益哈。好，今天非常感谢 Howard Cohn 律师的专业分析和宝贵的建议。Thank you, Howard Cohn, for your insightful explanations and practical advice. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.